Welcome to Holstein Connections, where we share the latest stories, insights, and news from Holstein Association USA and beyond. The largest dairy cattle breed association in the world, Holstein Association USA provides leadership, information, and services to help dairy producers worldwide be successful. Whether you're in the barn, on the road, or just tuning in for your dose of dairy news, we're glad you're here. This is Holstein Connections. Hello, Holstein enthusiasts, and welcome back to the podcast. Joining me today is this year's Distinguished Leadership Award recipient. The award is bestowed annually upon an individual who has provided outstanding and unselfish leadership and has made a notable contribution to the dairy industry. This year's Distinguished Leadership Award recipient, Corey Geiger, has built his career in the dairy industry, serving as managing editor for Hoard's Dairyman and now working as the lead dairy economist for CoBank. Corey has been extremely involved in the Wisconsin Holstein Association and Holstein Association USA, serving on the board of directors, including president in both organizations. He's also lent his talents to many other industry groups, all while staying grounded in his roots growing up on a registered Holstein farm. Corey, welcome to the podcast.
Well, glad to be here, Emily, and to share some insights with our Holstein and dairy industry friends.
Corey, you come from a long line of dairy farmers on both sides of your family, as I understand. Tell us a little bit more about your family's history in dairy farming.
Yeah, I guess for those who follow pedigrees on my top and bottom side, my parents were fifth generation dairy farmers, and I'm a sixth generation. Half of my family would be German roots, and the other Bohemian, or what today we'd call Czech Republic. But I grew up in talking about dairy since I can remember. My dad was one of 13 children, and eventually seven of them dairy farmed. And my mom family, of course, dairy farmed. And in 1981, my parents took over her family farm. And those were the subjects of my two books that I've written that have won 4 awards. And because when I grew up, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and parents working on the farm, like many kids.
You certainly have a deep dairy legacy there. What is the story, Corey, of your family's Ranrose prefix?
My parents were fifth generation farm kids. The thing we didn't have was registered Holsteins. Both farms had Holsteins, but not registered Holsteins. In 1971, Dad bought his first 3 registered Holstein heifers. And after he did that, a neighbor, Norman Cron, who's still alive and actually was Santa Claus when I was a little kid, but at least for the neighborhood, he came over and encouraged my dad to sign up for adult membership, and I still have a copy of that certificate. And throughout my years in the industry, I've always remind people listen to their neighbors and others they respect. And when Norman came over and did that with my dad, that meant everything. And so they sat there in the milk house on the bulk tank, which was a flat lid at the time, and doodled on prefixes. And mom and dad came up with Ranrose. And mom would always tell classifiers, "I'm the Rose of Ranrose, and there's Ran, as in Randy." And so the prefix is a combination of my parents' name.
What a great story. And I'll bet, Corey, that a lot of great prefixes have been brainstormed in a milk house on the ball tank top. Take us back to your childhood then, growing up on a registered Holstein farm, and tell us a little bit about that special first registered Holstein calf that you exhibited at the county fair as well.
Well, we had some registered Holsteins, and not all of ours were. And back in the days, I eventually used the grade up program, and then the entire herd was registered. But back in 1982, there was exactly one March calf born on our farm. March 30th, not exactly a good breeding birthday, but Ranrose Andy Angel April became my calf. Mom and dad gave that calf to me. And my first year at the county fair, I'm almost going to tear up about this because that calf taught me a lot. I think I tell kids that even if you don't grow up on a farm, a project calf, you learn skills one calf at a time. And then as you grow and get older, you learn to take care of a herd. But eventually that calf, I didn't have to have a halter on her. I mean, she lived here for 10 years but I got a red ribbon. It was a very competitive Manitowoc County Fair. I think there were 30 March calves in our class way back in that day in Northeast Wisconsin. But the next year she came back. she was very tall, and I was still a little boy, and I had my arms stretched up as high as I could. But when she was in the barn at the county fair, a young man named Bob Hagenall came by, and Bob actually was 10 years. He's a decade older than me, but went to the same high school. He's going to be this year's National Dairy Shrine Guest of Honor. And he looked at that heifer and he said, "Who helped you clip it?" And I said, "Well, I did most of it myself, and I got a little help from my neighbor." And he goes, "Can I help you get her ready for the show? That's a really nice heifer." And he did. Maybe he saw something in the heifer. Maybe he saw something in me. Maybe my dad sweet talked him, or maybe all of the above. But she stood second in class that day. I still remember Ray Keel was judging, and he and she was kind of taking me a little bit for a ride because I was not very strong yet. And he said, "Well, why don't you just go in the middle, and we're going to find out if we can find another heifer to beat her." And lo and behold, there was one heifer from Sunnyside Farms who became good friends. It was a valiant daughter. But that's what I remember from that moment, and I was hooked. Years later, when I was interviewed by for the Wisconsin Holstein Boy, I told that story, and they said, and one of the judges said, "What happens if that heifer don't turn out?" And I said, "Well, fate said she did." Became the foundation for some of my best cows, and maybe a different one would have came along and sparked it, but that's what sparked it for me.
Sometimes that's all it takes is one special calf to really get that interest started and get someone hooked. So as a child and a young adult, how were you involved in your family's journey with registered Holsteins along with your parents?
I was pretty unique. I didn't attend my first state Holstein convention till I was 16 years old because we registered our animals and tested them on DHI. That was it. And by the time I was 16, even before that, my dad was really noticing that I was interested in this whole endeavor. So we classified our cows for the first time when I was a sophomore in high school. I got out of school for it, clipped them all, had them all ready. We did our first embryo transfer and first professional cow pictures, and I led all that thing. That was for me. But the other unique thing I did, today fantasy football is really a big deal, and I happen to have 3 fantasy football teams, much to my wife's chagrin. But I would take bull books on the school bus and literally had a precursor of fantasy bull selection, and my buddies and I would sit on the bus and we'd draft bulls, and then we'd figure out who had the best group of bulls. And so fast forward, before I could drive, my dad took me to the bank, opened up my checkbook, and so I learned to balance a checkbook. And the other thing by then, when dad and I were riding anywhere, I would suggest the bulls, I would make a budget, and eventually I just took over that part of the business. And I remember I was 14 and I'm like, "I'll take 5 units of Starbucks and 5 units of Inspiration." And the late Dave Rose goes, "I'm not sure I can put that in your tank. Can I talk to one of your parents?" So I went in the house and mom goes, "Oh, hi Dave, how's it going?" And he goes, "Your son wants some semen." He goes, "Oh yeah, just tell me how much we owe." And I became an adult pretty quick.
What a great story. So, how did agricultural youth organizations such as 4-H, FFA, and eventually the Junior Holstein Association shape your interest in the dairy industry?
One thing that everybody needs to know about me, when I was 17 years old, I was out of the state of Wisconsin exactly 2 days, both to Chicago for day trips. I lived a very sheltered life, but my little upbringing in Manitowoc County exposed me to a lot of people, and it was 4-H, it was FFA, it was Junior Holstein, it was the county judging team, and all these different people that saw something in me and saw my excitement, enthusiasm. I remember when I was done as president, Jonathan Lamb said that I have boyish enthusiasm, and he meant it as a compliment. I tend to bring energy to what I do, and people fertilized that and mentored me. And so those organizations really helped me with my early leadership skills. I think I was president of our 4-H club. Well, not think I was president of our local 4-H club, FFA chapter, and county association.
You absolutely bring enthusiasm to everything you do, Corey. And you were also recognized as the Distinguished Junior Member, which, of course, is the highest honor given to a National Junior Holstein member in 1993. What stands out to you from that experience?
In my youth, that was the mountaintop. Our family never took a vacation. Remember, we worked on the farm. I have fun. I love to work. If you people always like, "Does he do all that?" Yes, yes, I do. But I went to my first convention at 16, state convention, and I'm sitting there listening to the bios of these young people, and I'm like, "I could do that. I think I could really do that." So I came home one day, and while we were milking cows, mom and dad and I said, if I ever become Wisconsin Holstein boy and make it to nationals, we all go as a family on a vacation. And they shook my hand, said, yeah, my mom and dad probably had no idea that they would pay on that bet. But what had happened, they were pushing me to do different things, and I saw I was motivated. Other people were inspiring me. And so my best friend in college and I, Rob Ripshin, actually was probably between us on the scoring sheet. I landed up winning, and I thanked everybody. I was so excited, and I ran to a payphone. Yes, kids, there was no cell phones back then, and I called my dad and I said, "We're going to New York, and you better figure it out." And of course, I had to fill out my book yet, but at that point, getting out of and those were the days Wisconsin, each state could only send two. So I was like, I just got out of America's Dairyland. I'm going to put my heart and soul in that book. And so when I got there, that convention, all I did, I went to the sale. I talked to all, I was like, all these breeders that I had read about, they're there. And I'm just walking around the sale. I'm like, oh, I think that's Bob Miller. I think this, and I just walked up and started talking and asking questions. And I stayed till the last animal was sold talking to breeders.
What a memorable moment for you. So, Corey, you then went on to attend college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where you studied dairy science and ag economics. Were there any key moments or opportunities throughout your college experience that helped shape your career goals?
Well, number one, I wasn't planning on going to college. I wanted to be a dairy farmer, and my mom and dad said if I didn't go to college or tech school, that I wasn't coming home on a farm. So that was foundation number one. I applied to UW Madison, and my freshman year, two other friends, both grew up on registered Holstein farms, were going to get a second major in ag economics, and I always like money, and I'm like, well, I'll go do that too. Then I had an internship in Ohio with the NOBA Northern Ohio Breeders Association, formerly known as NOBA. It's part of Genex, and I learned to write that summer and tell stories. Uh, the NOBA team, the late Hap Allen, called my professor Dave Dixon and said, "Hey, he needs to major in journalism." I'm like, "No, no, no! I'm a senior. I am not picking up a third major." But Dave Dixon talked to the Hordes Dairyman team, and that's what spurred were the seeds to that journey. Then the last thing that sticks out, Dr. George Shook. So the reason we have somatic cell counts for genetic evaluation, that was Shook. But he took me and Rob Ripshin into his office one day and said, "You two know cows. You need to know the consumer side of this," and encouraged us to take the capstone food science program class, which was dairy processing. And we learned throughputs on dairy plants and everything else. And that, fast forward to today, is astronomically important to my current role.
I can see all how all of these pieces are coming together, Corey, for your career and where you are today. So prior to graduation, you became a full-time editor, associate editor for Hordes Dairyman, leading to 28 years with the historic and well-known magazine, including many where you were managing editor. Take us through your journey and your time spent with Hordes Dairyman.
Well, so I went in for a what's supposed to be get to know each other session in October of '94. And by the end of the day, I had a job offer. Now, remember, I wasn't graduating till December of '95. That's 15 months spread. I
Wow.
took a week to mull it over, and I accepted the job and started working full time that June and took a full coursework load at that fall. I learned to be organized, extremely organized during that moment of time. The other thing was there were people that I didn't know. I mean, I remember being at a show and this gentleman comes up to me, very distinguished gentleman. "Hey, welcome to our team. I look forward to spending time with you." And I'm like, I was embarrassed. I didn't know who this gentleman was, but he was talking to Lee Allenstein, the veterinarian that was World Dairy Expo's vet and a longtime columnist at Hordes, and the late Merle Howard, who was a Holstein classifier and Klusendorf winner. And well, he's hanging out with good company. And later I walked away and I realized it was Gene Meyer, uh, retired managing editor at Hordes, and we became friends. And he was a mentor of mine, and Bill Knox, the late Bill Knox. But anyway, these four editors that were there had 120 years experience, and I had none. And I became a sponge, and I learned to write, and I learned to tell stories, and I learned to edit, and I learned to lead from them four men.
Well, what an opportunity, a huge learning opportunity for you at that point in your life to learn from such great people in our industry. Corey, what was the most rewarding part about your time at Horns Dairyman?
I think the people, farm visits, the life learning, and then something that happened that kind of changed my career trajectory was the pandemic in dairy live stream. Mark Stevenson, the retired professor emeritus from UW-Madison, a dairy economist, and called me like the 3rd week of March and said, "We need to do a live show. We are dumping milk. There's so many things that are happening in this industry that we need." Well, anyway, we went from that call to 10 days, counting the weekend, to a live broadcast that eventually had 600 on live, and we would troubleshoot different things for the dairy industry for the next 100 weeks. And I learned the power of collaboration. I certainly don't know the answers to everything. Full of no, there's people that know a lot more than me. If we go to cartoon land, one of my superpowers is my network. And if I don't know an answer, I sure to heck can know someone that can find one. And that's another thing that was rewarding for me at Hortons Dairyman. It opened a door domestically and internationally to people.
All those connections. I'm sure you made money in your 28 years there. So you've also had the opportunity to participate in US Dairy Export Council trade missions, which of course pairs your economic interest and knowledge with your storytelling talents to really report on growth opportunities for US dairy product exports. What countries have you traveled to as part of the trade mission, and what did you learn from these experiences?
It gave me the US Dairy Export Council trade missions gave me a front row seat to the future. I learned everything I've ever written. I wanna tell my busy dad, a dairy farmer, and all the busy dairy farmers out there what they need to know, very succinctly. I knew that was our future. I mean, if we didn't we're exporting now 17% of our milk production. If we didn't have that, we'd have to cull almost 2,000,000 dairy cows in this country. I traveled to United Arab Emirates, Dubai twice, Singapore, Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, and these are all top dairy markets for us. And the dairy proteins, the amino acids found in milk are the most complete known to humanity. That's what makes the dairy cow so valuable to humankind, and that's why it's not only in those trade missions, I was able to share what takes place on a US dairy farm.
So at the same time that you were starting your career in the dairy industry, you were also quick to give back and become involved in different organizations, one of them being the Wisconsin Holstein Association. Why was it important for you to become involved, and what did your involvement in the Wisconsin Holstein Association look like, Corey?
So again, I wasn't very well traveled as a youth, but there were other people, the mentors in my life, and I would not be here without them. And so the inspiration I received, I wanted to give back to others. That was the foundational purpose. I also figured I was a person who could get things done and build coalitions and collaborations. In my county, I think of people like the late Bill Borgward from Sunnyside Farms and Greg Miller, who's another Holstein breeder, our veterinarian who inspired me, Dr. Lyle Holschbach, the good registered Holstein farm. We had the county twilight meeting here when I was in 1991, my senior year in high school, and I had a really good show heifer. And Tim Natsky comes here and says, "Where are you taking? Who are you going to show her with at state show?" I was just going to take her by myself. And he brought me into a string. And I said, "Well, what do I owe you? I don't have a lot of money." And he goes, "If you work as hard at that show as you do here, we'll be fine on the money part." So we were tied in a string that would a state grand champion that year. Dave Sellner was up in our neighborhood and in our county agent, Scott Gunnerson. But when I do things for others, I think of those people and what they did for me. And for years, I used to do Dairy Bowl questions and that too, because Rod Stoll does a wonderful job. There's others, but excitement, make learning fun. If we're not having fun, then why are we doing this stuff?
That's a great lesson. Tap into the latest news, stories, and updates from Holstein Association USA with our recently launched monthly email newsletter, The Holstein Insider. From association headlines to member features, events, and key deadlines, it's a quick and easy way to stay up to date. Sign up now by visiting holsteinusa.com or by using the link in the show notes and get the latest news sent straight to your inbox. One of the things that you spearheaded was the creation of Midwest Holsteins, which is a joint publication for several different Midwest states and something that's still going today. Where did this idea come from and how did that take shape?
Well, I was on the state Holstein board for 8 years. I was always on the finance committee, and I saw budgets, and I knew a lot about publications, and I figured we were more powerful together than separate. I think some of my our sister states in the area in the upper Midwest were maybe a little leery at first that Wisconsin was coming with this idea, because maybe back in the old days, we had a reputation of being the, kid on the block or whatever you wanna call it, but I just said, These are the numbers. We can all win in this area." And so some states voted to join us, and eventually they all did. For those who didn't join right away, we left the door wide open, but it allowed the editors to collaborate and work together and learn from one another, and we had a higher subscription base of readers, so it was just an all-around win.
Yeah, a great way for several different states to work together. So, Corey, along with your wife Krista, you co-chaired the 2019 National Holstein Convention, which was held in Appleton, Wisconsin. So the convention drew 1,200 attendees from 28 states and 19 countries. How did you and Krista lead the rest of the team of volunteers through planning and executing such a large event?
Our first thing was to find the right committee leaders. Well, first our executive committee and then the right committee leaders. And the executive committee, we worked through all that, and we wanted people that could collaborate, get things done. And we reminded everybody that keep the communication channels open. We wrote minutes for every meeting, so we had documentation of what happened so that our memories were all in sync. People could edit those meetings. Guess who typed those up usually? But I we just kept the theme. We're planning a party for our Holstein friends. Let's be fun, let's be educational. We had the genetic symposium there, day and a half. That brought people from around the world. We had some world-class dairy farm tours because of the location up in here in Northeast Wisconsin. And so all those things came together, and my wife was an equal part of that journey. We had a volunteer list like no other that year, but we did some things that a normal convention probably wouldn't either.
Do you have a favorite memory from the 2019 convention?
Yeah, we had a wonderful team, and actually that was chairing family night, and one of the things we wanted to have, it was at Lambeau Field, and we wanted to have the tours at Lambeau, and they would only take them if you put money up front, and we convinced each other that we'll just buy the whole tours from 4 o'clock on. We will take the bet that our Holstein friends will want those tours. Well, they were so popular. I think we had 600 of them go through Lambeau for the guided tours. I started telling the Wisconsin people, please don't buy the tickets. You can go any other time. Save them for everybody else. And that's what we did. I think the best picture of my wife and I was captured. We both had Aaron Rodgers jerseys on, and we were just walking because everything was working so wonderful that day, and people were just having fun. That was my favorite memory at the time. Now, as I look back, my favorite memory was that was also the convention I got named elected Holstein president. And that was the last time my dad ever was at a public event. And I can still remember the smiles on my mom and dad's face. And I can just think of what they thought of about us starting with pretty much nothing but a couple, three registered heifers, and what that moment meant to them. And I didn't know it at the time, but less than 90 days later, my dad would be deceased, and I remember the final banquet that night, and I was glad it happened that way because it was just a wonderful reflection on our family's journey.
What a special, special memory and a full circle moment for you and your father too, I'm sure. So, Corey, you also served on Holstein Association USA's board of directors, first as an at-large director from 2010 to 2016, and later serving as vice president and president. Who or what inspired you initially to run for the board?
I would say my fellow Wisconsin Holstein breeders, especially the guard, the group that was probably my dad's age. I think they saw what I was doing for our state association. I remember Marty Kenyon was the first to call me, Holstein breeder from down in Richland Center, and Paul Burr and some of the others down in that. I was pretty young. I wasn't, I'm only 53 right now. When you think about, I was elected in 2010, so that's 16 years ago. And Kevin Jorgensen was very supportive as well, and other so with that, support and from people, my peers, I decided to run. And I ran at large because I wanted the delegates to have the opportunity to say, hey, sure, it's fine to have two people from Wisconsin because Region 5 was its own seat. And I didn't want to run against a full time dairy farmer from our state. So those were a couple things in my mind. Even though I was very, very active on our farm, I'm like, I don't get my full paycheck from the farm. So I didn't want to take that opportunity away from others, but I was ready to serve.
And so a lot happened during your time on the board, but what are some of the significant events that really highlighted your time serving the members?
Well, when you think back all the way to 2010, we're in year two about of the journey on genomics. So there was a lot of energy placed on that topic, getting breeders up to speed, figuring how that fit in the industry. That was about the time of the creation of the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. So those were big things that we were talking about. Then fast forward to the years that I was president, 2019 to 2022, I had some great ideas and not only senior staff at Holstein, but our board were very behind, and we had Hill visits in Washington, D.C. in February of 2020. We met with our elected representatives in the House and the Senate. We had a meeting with Colin Peterson, who was then chair of the House Ag Committee. It was very productive, and we were building momentum in a unique way. Then came March of 2020, which probably is a traumatic spot in everyone's life, and COVID pandemic was upon us and we went into business survival mode. And I remember calls, a lot of calls. How do we keep, is it an essential business? How do we keep it open? How do we get things done on the farm? And all these other issues. And Jonathan Lamb and myself and John Meyer and many staff members were on calls on a daily basis. And we got through that. We had our first convention my final year. It was Pennsylvania was our host. They did a wonderful job. We had some unique rules that we had to follow that first year, largely governed by state government, and we made it all work. But I think collaboration and working and talking and communicating were very essential during that time period.
Yeah, you certainly had an interesting time to lead the organization through COVID, but we made it out on the other side, didn't we, Corey? You also spent several years as a director for the Council of Dairy Cattle Breeders. What did you focus on in this role? What did that look like for you?
What I spent my time on, there are people that are smarter than me on genetics and all the other topics that the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding would spend their time on. But what I brought to the table was the connection from the farm, the dairy farm, to the processor, to the consumer, and offered insights on the economics of the value of components in the milk supply and where this whole thing was headed. Back in those days, we were a butterfat deficit nation, and the Holstein cow, 85% of the semen sold in 2025, according to the National Association of Animal Breeders, was Holstein. So the Holstein cow has really transformed what we're delivering to consumers. And bringing those groups together from the breed associations to DRPCs, DHIAs, and the bull studs, it was important conversations during that time. But I think really the value of milk and what's in the milk.
Another thing that you volunteered your time is to World Dairy Expo in many capacities, including the board of directors and as the assistant superintendent of the collegiate dairy judging contest. What do you enjoy about being involved in World Dairy Expo?
In 1990, our county team, Manitowoc County, won the state contest. I was only a junior in high school. And then we had two, the Borgort boys who were on our team were sophomores. And I remember walking onto the colored shavings and saying, wow, that was another moment. This is where I want to be. And that inspired me. So as a professional, I started getting involved. I took over I was asked to lead the intercollegiate dairy judging contest, which I did for over a decade from Dave Sellner. Again, another important part of my formative years being on the college judging team. Eventually, I was secretary treasurer of the Klusendorf Association, kind of the Hall of Fame of the Dairy Cattle Exhibitor Committee or industry. The Merle Howard Award was created. I, to this day, write the scripts for those top junior at the show. So giving back and inspiring others were some of my original goals. Then in about 2013, the general manager Mark Clark and Janet Keller, who was head of communications, wanted to take me out for lunch in Fort Atkinson, and I'm like, "What do you guys wanna talk about? Can't we just do this on the phone? I really I like being efficient." And they're like, "No, no, we gotta talk this over a meal." So they get there, and I remember it's the old Black Hawk Tavern in Fort Atkinson. We're just talking about stuff, and then all of a sudden, "Well, we have this idea that we should do a 50th anniversary book for World Dairy Expo, this, that, and the other thing." And they're painting their vision, and all of a sudden I'm like, "Well, wait a minute here. Where do I fit in?" They're like, "We would like you to be the editor of it." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." And that's about how I reacted that day because I knew it would be a heavy lift. I knew that a lot of this was oral history yet. Nothing had been documented. And at the end of that meeting, I asked, could I have my supervisor, our managing editor at that time, Steve Larson, be co-editor with me on that. And so we landed up doing that. And We Need a Show has sold over 10,000 copies, and it's kind of the definitive book on that show. So that was a crescendo moment.
Lots of fun memories there, and that's a book that's definitely sitting on my shelf behind me. So, Corey, in 2023, you started a new role as the lead dairy economist for CoBank. How do you use your knowledge of course, dairy cattle genetics and then economics as well in that role?
So I joined CoBank in August of 2023. I had three immediate goals in mind. In this order. Number one, start documenting butterfat and protein production in this country on a monthly basis. Nobody was doing that. Number two, weave in the value of genetics. For years, as a director of the Wisconsin Holstein and of Holstein USA, I heard so many breeders. I wish my banker knew the value of genetics. Well, if I go work for the largest agricultural bank in the US and can't do that, then I should get walked out the door. And number three, I was wanting to document fully the beef on dairy movement. I had talked about it way back in 2017 at the 101st USDA Egg Outlook, or excuse me, at the USDA Egg Outlook Forum. And when not many people were talking about it in 2017, now everybody's talking about it. Those were my three goals. And so I worked with the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. I worked with Tom Lyon. I worked with Jersey to start putting numbers on this and show that this is the main driver in this dramatic shift of butterfat from 3.65% in 2010 to 4.29% this year. The genetics have changed, and it's been an impact on from our dairy farmers, and protein has come along too. So those were how I weaved that in, and I try to bring genetics to life in an interesting way that bankers and others in finance would find value in it, and to move the needle on this topic.
You've also remained engaged in your family's farm over the years. How does this keep you grounded and what does your involvement look like there?
Yeah, dad died in 2019, and now I own half the farm and manage it with my mom. And then we've recently moved to Carnegie Farms, which was the first robot dairy 25 years ago, and we have some Angus there. Some of my Ranrose Holsteins are at Carnegie's, and some are at Matt Craycraft, another young Holstein breeder. I do this to keep me grounded in the reality. Nothing happens perfectly in life. When you have livestock, you have dead stock. The simple tenets in life that when I'm on stage talking, I just got done being on the road 16 of the last 17 states, but I can be authentic. I can be real. I've walked in everyone's shoes, but now I can put the numbers to it and try to tie these trends together. Those are probably some of the reasons, and it's in my blood. I enjoy it.
There's nothing quite like that firsthand experience when it comes to connecting with those that you're talking to, which you do an excellent job at. So, outside of your career and your extensive involvement in so many different aspects of the dairy community, what other hobbies do you and your wife, Krista, enjoy doing?
Well, some personal hobbies for me, certainly being an author and writing 2 books using our farm family as good characters in a novel that really happened. We also Krista and I have a rental property up in Door County, Wisconsin, which is a big tourist area that's been a bunch of joy. Another fun My wife and her family really, they're a little bit more adventurous than me. I'm a little bit more of a turtle, she's a little bit more of a rabbit. She applied for and we eventually were on Family Feud. Their farm was featured in on an episode of The Bachelor on CBS Sports. And the other thing that would be a hobby Krista and I have done is we're not competing right now, but we've competed in dance. American rhythm category, cha-cha, rumba, East and West Coast swing. Eventually, we won our division as an amateur couple at the National Fred Astaire finals. And at the close of the 2018 World Dairy Expo, we did a Texas two-step with our coaches, who were the reigning Texas two-step champions. So those are some fun hobbies that we do together.
You certainly find lots of ways to stay busy, Corey. But what does it mean to you to be recognized with Holstein Association USA's Distinguished Leadership Award?
It's humbling because I stand and look at some of the past winners. I look at the past presidents, the past leaders of this association, people that I looked up as a young person, and to be considered in that group is pretty special. The other part of it too is I hope I got a couple decades left here of service to the industry, and it will inspire me to do some things that maybe I haven't thought of yet as well. But to be recognized by your peers for the work you do means everything.
Before we wrap up the discussion, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I The big thing I would like to add to the young people that are listening to this, remember I didn't travel, wasn't out of the state really until I was 17, but the dairy cow can take you around the world. The theme of this entire podcast is that first show calf led to me growing my knowledge in a bunch of different areas, including economics, including milk processing. And while I didn't travel anywhere before 17, I've been in 5 continents now and spoken over 40 states in almost every Canadian province, and it's all because of the Holstein cow and what she has done for me and the value she has brought to our farm family.
Well, you're an amazing example of where the Holstein cow can take you, and certainly an inspiration for many of our young junior Holstein members out there. Now, Corey, just to get to know you a little bit better here at the end, we're going to end with some 5 fun would you rather questions. So, are you ready?
I am.
All right. Early morning milking or late night barn check?
Easy one for me, early morning milking. I'm an early morning person, and I'm not a hoot owl.
People usually have a pretty strong opinion on that one. Would you rather travel east or west for National Holstein Convention?
West for the scenery, but not the time zone change.
Ice cream cone or ice cream sundae?
We're gonna go with ice cream sundae since it was invented in Two Rivers, Wisconsin and Manitowoc County.
Oh, I didn't know that. There you go. Would you rather compete in Dairy Bowl or Dairy Jeopardy?
I'd say Dairy Jeopardy and, competed actually at the New Jersey convention for a fundraiser.
And this question is not one we ask most people, Corey. It's unique to you. Would you rather add another book to your collection or edit someone else's book?
I have 2 books rattling around my head, and I gotta have time to write them. So I guess I should go with write another book.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Corey, for joining me today, and congratulations on your Distinguished Leadership Award.
I appreciate it, Emily, and for those who listen to this, podcast. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Holstein Connections. Whether you're in the barn, on the road, or just tuning in for your dose of dairy news, we're glad you're here. Until next time, this is Holstein Connections.